I actually went back and forth on making this video, not because I don't love Pride or think that it's important, but because I'm more of an October queer than a June queer. Most of the LGBTQ+ books that I read are transgender horror or twisted sapphic literary fiction. And that's not really the vibe for Pride. Pride is sunny and bright. It is a celebration. Although saying that, it is always important to remember that the first Pride was a riot. Therefore, because so much of what I read isn't sunny and bright, I've gone in a different direction. Here are 5 non-fiction books that you should read for Pride. I personally read a lot more fiction than non-fiction, but if there is one kind of non-fiction that I do read, it's queer stuff. And like I just said, the first Pride was a riot, and you might not have known that, which is why it's so important to read queer history and read about queer culture. So let's get into it. We'll start with something broad, but also definitive before moving into more specific things. This is the LGBTQ+ history book, published by DK. This is a very, very impressive coffee table book. It explores queer identities, queer stories, and queer histories from so many different angles. And this is arguably a little bit of self-promotion because I was the voice of this book. I recorded the LGBTQ+ history book. So if you want to listen to this on audio, it's my voice. I'd love to do more audiobooks, honestly. It is a dream job of mine, but I kind of feel like my life is moving in a different direction. I know, we'll see. What's so impressive about this book is its thoroughness and its scope. When I say that this is the LGBTQ+ history book, I really mean it. The history explored in this book doesn't just go back thousands upon thousands of years, but it also spreads across the entire globe. There are chapters in here dedicated to native cultures, the Maori people of New Zealand, Native American and Canadian people, and the two-spirit and non-binary identities that they have. This book explores the queer histories of places like China and India. It explores queerness in relation to religion and politics. Everything you've ever wanted to know about all of queer history spanning the entire globe is in here. Queer history from every continent, every culture. It is expansive, it is extensive, it is thorough, and it is breathtakingly interesting. And yes, as you go through and you get toward the end, it does focus a lot on modern and Western queerness. You get a lot of information about Stonewall, a lot of information about queer and trans rights within a Western perspective. But I really can't overstate and oversell just how thorough and intense this thing is. Take this chapter, for example. This chapter here is about the Abbasid Caliphate. From 750 to 1258 CE. The Abbasid Caliphate stretched across Iraq and some of Egypt. And this is about queerness in that time and place. I think that proves my point. This is the definitive queer history book. It doesn't go into immense detail on everything, but it is a ridiculously enormous overview. Check it out. Then we have one of my favorite non-fiction books of all time, Bad Gays, A Homosexual History. This was written by Hugh Lemmy and Ben Miller, and it is an absolute riot. I've done a full review of this that you can go and check out. You can see a link to it here. But in short, this is exactly what it says on the tin. Bad Gays is a collection of chapters, each of which focuses on a gay man or lesbian from across history who was in some way bad. It's a really, really fun and funny and also very informative book that reminds us that gay people, just like straight people, trans people, just like cis people, have the capacity to be both good and bad. And these are some of history's baddest gays. There's a chapter in here on Lawrence of Arabia. The very first chapter is about the Roman Emperor Hadrian. Towards the end, we have a chapter on the gangster Ronnie Cray, and there's even a chapter on fascist, bisexual Japanese icon Yukio Mishima. The book is thorough, it is detailed, it is not tongue-in-cheek, but the subject matter alone feels funny to me. So often, both queer fiction and non-fiction focuses on celebrating queerness or fighting back against cis-normativity, heteronormativity, patriarchy. But queer people are bad as much as we are good because we are human. And this book does not celebrate the bad queers of history. It simply reminds us that they existed, and also reminds us that these people were in fact queer. Ronnie Cray, for example, was famously gay, but Hadrian? Did you know Hadrian was gay? Well, he was. You're going to be surprised by some of the things you learn in here. I would say the only negative is that it skews far more towards men, but so does history in general. So much history is written by men about men. This book was also written by two men, and so it does kind of uphold that patriarchal stereotype, I guess. Could have done with some more women, but maybe we just don't have that many accounts of bad lesbians throughout history. I don't know, honestly, because, well, it's not in the book. However, I really think that this is a very informative and very fun and engaging book to check out. The Bad Gays of History. Focusing more on the positive now, we have two anthology collections called Queer Life, Queer Love. Combined, these books feature nearly 100 queer voices. But I have to admit, not all of this is non-fiction. In here, you'll find short stories, poetry, and essays. Most of the writers in here you're unlikely to have heard of. Some you will have, some you won't. And all of it is very simply a celebration of queerness. But because you have so many voices and so many kinds of things in here, essays, poetry, and stories, you're getting an incredible spectrum. The experiences you'll have in here vary enormously, much like the queer spectrum itself. And because there is so much, and yet it is so short, and therefore a lot of these are very short snippets of queer life and queer love, you get everything. Every type of queerness is in here, every colour in the spectrum. And these voices come from different places, different cultures, different backgrounds and experiences. Both of these books were edited together by Matt Bates, Golnoosh Noor, and Sarah and Kate Beale. And I'm just going to quickly read to you from the introduction by Matt Bates and Golnoosh Noor. Being queer is hard. Recognizing one's own personal difference and learning self-acceptance can be a painful and bewildering journey, and it is more than just identifying as LGBTQ+. To us, queerness is about disrupting the status quo, while identifying as anything other than cis-heterosexual is automatically disruptive to the cis-heteronormative world that we have to live in. Queerness is also about an attitude and a courage that lets one express their own deviation from the norm. Writing is an action, a call to arms. Putting words on the page, articulating our fears and desires is a form of resistance, a symbolic shredding of the heteronormative script. It's a powerful statement, and it's true. And that's what you get in here, a celebration of queer life and queer love. But in every moment of writing here, you're getting an experience, you're getting an attitude, you're getting a perspective, and you're getting art from the queer community. Now I'm going to be a little bit cheeky and talk about two books that I haven't actually read yet. These are the books that I'm reading for Pride. This is Outrageous by Paul Baker. It is the history of Section 28 and the fight that queer Brits engaged in for LGBTQ+ education. In case you don't know what Section 28 is, it was a devastating law that came into effect in Britain in 1988, 2 years before I was born. It was put in place by Margaret Thatcher's government, and it made the education of anything to do with queerness illegal. Schools were forbidden from talking about the existence of queer people. And as far as I remember, Section 28 ended in 2002 when I was 12 years old. That is 5 years into a Labour government. 5 years that a Labour government could have dismantled Section 28 but didn't. That in itself is shocking. And this book, Outrageous, is named after a queer rights group who were called Outrage and fought back against Section 28. Ian McKellen spoke out about Section 28. There's footage of it in a brilliant interview he did with, I think it was Parkinson. Right now in Britain and other places across the world, we're facing similar things. So many anti-trans laws and bills are being written in across the world. Section 28 is happening again right now to trans people because we're the new fashionable scapegoat, and everyone knows that. So it feels more important than ever to read a book like this, the entire history of Section 28 and the fight against it. Also, I am so sorry for the noise you can probably hear right now. I'm trying to just talk through it, but my upstairs neighbours went nuts rearranging, and I think they've moved all of their noisiest appliances right above my head. I'm on the ground floor, I do not enjoy it, I can't wait to move. Anyway, I haven't read this yet. This is my non-fiction for Pride. If you have read this, let me know what you thought of it. My friend Jess read it and gave me this copy and said that it changed their life, so I'm sure it's going to have a similar effect on me. And finally, another book that I haven't yet read and I cannot wait to dig into today at the time of recording is The Outside, a collection of trans and non-binary comics. I've been getting back into comic books in a big way the past few weeks. Like, I am obsessively getting back into what the DC universe has been up to the last few years. And I've had this on my shelf for a little while. I think it was sent to me as a review copy that I never got round to, and I'm feeling very guilty about that right now. It's a slender book, but inside here we have 29 comics, which means that as soon as you flick through it, you get a really amazing scope of art. Lots of different styles in here, lots of different interpretations, so much creativity. It is bursting at the seams. 29 tales of self-love and affirmation from trans and non-binary people. When it comes to comics and non-fiction, I really adore the crossover between them. Graphic memoirs are wonderful things. Fun Home by Alison Bechdel is one of my favourite books of all time. The Outside is another wonderful example of the crossover between comic books and non-fiction. A selection of 29 short, graphic trans and non-binary memoirs. What a beautiful, gorgeous thing. This was also a Kickstarter and now it exists in the real world and I can't wait to finally read it. I've had this thing for months and now is the time. It's Pride Month. Let's dig into this thing. I really hope you check it out as well. Again, if you've already read this, tell me how you felt. Tell me what you thought. Tell me what your experience was. There you go. Those were 3 non-fiction books that I heartily recommend to read for Pride, and 2 that I haven't read myself and I'm about to dig into. We need to remember queer history. We need to remember the history of Pride, the history of our ongoing fight for liberation, and I was gonna say for acceptance, but at this point I couldn't give a shit. I don't need people to accept me. I just want my rights. I deserve my legal and medical rights. I really don't care who accepts me. And there is a long history of this exact attitude within queer culture. So read some books on it. Happy Pride Month and subscribe for books.